Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to the Student Nexus workshop or workforce today. Today we have a couple of things we want to bring you up to speed on. Tim, if you could give us the next slide, please. So the agenda for today is we're going to go over an update on the Nexus Student Survey by Anita, and then we're going to have Drew from Texas A&M go over their student program, and then we're going to do a quick survey at the end, and then next time we'll talk about our student workforce call and specific things we'd like to do and a call to action there for everyone on the call today. So Anita, would you like to give us a brief update on the student survey?
Yes, so for those of you who aren't familiar with this, as a outcome of the Nexus Day that was the day before the start of PERC last summer, PERC in Boston, as one of the outcomes of the student workforce development program, we put together a student survey based on some of our discussions. And we have taken that at Utah and run it through the Institutional Review Board just to be on the safe side. And that is the process we seem to be stuck in at the moment. We are getting close, and I will say that it's not that the Institutional Review Board has any issues with the survey. We are still getting it through this survey has to be presented to us in this format sort of thing, and just working on the pre-submission really at this point. We don't anticipate any issues, and we believe we've addressed all the questions, so that we're hoping in the next week or two we should hear from the Institutional Review Board on their ruling. As soon as we do that, we will send a link out to the various mailing lists for the workforce development, and then gather together the results and hopefully present them at one of these one of the future calls on student workforce development. So I will keep you guys posted as I know more.
Okay, thanks, Anita. And then next up, we have Drew from Texas A&M. Drew, I'll let you introduce yourself and do a quick rundown of your program. And then Tim will do advanced slides as you need them. And thank you, everyone.
Right. So, hi, everybody. I'm Dhruv Chakravarti. I'm from Texas A&M University. I'm the Director for User Services and Research. And as part of that, we've been building a student program at Texas A&M's High Performance Research Computing. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for joining us, and hope you're having a fantastic day with your loved ones as well. Tim, next slide, please. Thank you. So our name is High Performance Research Computing. We've existed at Texas A&M since the late 1980s. So we're almost 30 years plus in operational mode. We used to be called supercomputing, but there was a reorg before my time at A&M, and now we focus largely on becoming more of a center. So we offer computing resources across the country. We have large resources for our campus users. So Grace is pretty much an expanse-sized machine. Then we offer the ACES and faster platforms for people to use around the country. So if you have any questions, let us know. And as part of that, our student program has been heavily involved in the growth that we have accomplished over the last 5 years. They have been a critical part of building out our research exchange, our user portals, our education platforms, our enablement strategy, and training, and almost goes so far as to say half of this would not have been possible without them. And the key to this has been collaboration. So what I would love for you to take away from my talk today is that this is possible at institutions of all sizes. Even if you're starting small and you have a vision and trust in your students, you'll get there. So I'll tell you a story of how we got there and what we're doing today. Next slide, please, Tim. So I hinted on this a little bit about what a student program looks like today at Texas A&M. So our students primarily are involved in our ticketing and help desk operations. And even there, we have different groups. We have some groups which are deeply technical and they can solve compiler questions, whereas we have other groups who are more responsive to researchers who are new and just want to get their feet wet and are new to high performance computing. So we've started accepting students from different majors, and I'll tell a story about our first sociology major, and we're growing our liberal arts program. Our students pretty much run our primers courses, which are hour-long courses. These are peer-mentored, peer-taught for students, and they help organize our short courses. As students get more experience, they run our short courses as well. We have been running applications on the NSF ACES, FASTA, and Frontera machines. This team is again spearheaded by graduate and undergraduate students. We are also working with Los Alamos, and that too is a student-run engagement. The entirety of our software design team that includes apps on the on pretty much every mobile store, automation of software and ticketing functions, our dashboard, which is built on the Open On Demand platform, that is a student-run team. We have been publishing papers on this front, and it's a pretty effective technology. The curriculum for our Summer Computing Academy, that's another way we have attracted students. This is a K through 12 program for middle and high school students. We typically have between 90 to 200 students participate in this. And our student workers and student technicians build the curriculum. They serve as instructors, counselors, and now we're trying to get education majors involved in this program as well. A few years ago, we were funded to create the Sweeter Cyber Team, which spread across New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, and now it has a little outpost in Alabama as well. And this team's focus was on CI technologies. And our students are deeply engaged in this. They keep the platforms running. They offer the software support as well as the technical help sessions, which happen every Tuesday afternoon. Finally, we have a community which focuses on two-year schools and introducing cyber infrastructure and research computing into the two-year curriculum. Students form a huge part of this, and we've had a lot of interested students join us in this. So we've been slowly building this culture up, but this is not what it looked like on day one in 2016. Next slide, Tim. Thank you. So on the right, you see the people behind all the magic. So that's Derek. Fixing something, which is how he always was. And you can see Crystal in the data center. And Derek and Crystal were the core and pretty much the only parts of our team in 2016. They had backgrounds in electrical engineering and computer science, and they were fantastic. It was amazing stepping into my work office on day one, and Derek walks in and tells me how I should be leading my life and what the expectations from my job are from a student. So right away, you know that you're in for a fun time. We were very fortunate to have them. And, their starting job description was basically respond to some emails, ping people on Slack, answer the phone. But they were very motivated, and pretty soon they picked up IBM LSF. They were performing ticketing functions, closing out tickets, responding to tickets, managing accounts, and were even offering some software support. It's not surprising that both of them have done incredibly well. But the main thing they did, what they achieved, was they convinced everyone the value proposition of having students, and they established the trust factor, which is the hardest thing to establish. They were able to tell people, hey, we can get this done and you can trust us to do it. And in response, all we had to do was treat them like adults, and they loved it. Next slide, please. So a period of growth really happened starting in 2017. I would say it started with giving our student technicians a lot of growing privileges on our machines. We are, of course, audited by the state, and we have to follow all those protocols. But we started with giving them some limited suite of functions and giving them accounting capacities. A huge shift in mindset came in the summer of 2017 when we launched the Summer Computing Academy program. This was for 20 high school students. And Derek and Crystal pretty much went through and developed a lot of the materials for this. They launched a website, they created the forms, and then they were able to show that not only can they answer the form, they can run an entire program, and the trust value was really starting to set in. This enabled us to go and hire a couple more students in fall, and it took our training materials, which are more geared for graduate students, and started building this huge training database that we now have on our hands. That was And you can see on the slide that was Derek teaching Linux to high school students. Hopefully the students survived. I think a lot of them made it into college, so they did pretty okay. All right, later that year, Derek and Crystal presented at a NSF workshop in New Orleans on their work as cyber infrastructure professionals. I think they called themselves cyber infrastructure engineers, but that was okay. We encouraged that. And then Crystal participated in SC as a student volunteer. And that was the genesis of our student cluster team. And that started an entire new journey where Lisa Perez, my colleague today, is helping with the HPCI engagement at SC. So that is how influential these two students had on the future of Texas A&M student workforce. Next slide, please. All right, so 2017, in walks Dylan. And Dylan is a young sociology major who has transferred from a smaller school in San Antonio with a huge smile on his face. Didn't really have all the technical skills we needed, but he was just happy to be there. And that to me was the start of journey as a CI facilitator. And just realizing how important it is to make a researcher feel at ease. And Dylan had that magical ability to do that. So we had Dylan, Crystal, and Derek, and our team kept growing. At this point, Derek took it upon himself to create learning objectives for these positions and learning outcomes. So here was Derek interviewing students for these positions with created outcomes. And A&M did not have a formal policy on these. That started around 2018 or 19. And of course, we have that in place. And we encouraged Derek and Crystal to participate in interviews with staff for positions. So the students started picking up what it meant to be part of a bigger group, to have a discussion where you respected everyone's views, and they started picking those things up. This is also when we started exploring opportunities to hire non-STEM students into our program. We included Marlene, who was an MIS major, and it just kept growing till we finally got permission to hire a graduate student once again in 2018. A&M has some very strict rules about hiring graduate students, and it took a while for us to get there. Once we got graduate students on our program, we were able to expand our work. Derek and Crystal built out the website, HPRC's website. The way it looks today, they've just had a huge contribution there. Our first grad student, Tree, he may have been one of the first people at A&M to build out and map out A&M's cloud strategy from HPRC, and software builds on the App Store. All of that magic just started happening. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so while all of this is happening, we realized that one way to engage students and give them ownership of projects was via instruction. And you've heard me talk a little bit about our different programs, and this is a more expansive view of that, where our students were now running our short course program, especially the introductory courses. This way, our students could feel like they were a part of HPRC's mission. Around COVID, we created the primers, which are an online only course, and we noticed that when undergraduate students stopped this, our participation from undergraduate students was through the roof. Instead of 20 people attending a course, we had 75, 80 people signing up. So we built the primers, and based on the primers and short courses, the state of Texas, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, funded us via two programs to create what might have been one of the earliest micro-credentials program for cyber infrastructure research. So we created 21 courses which are accredited. So now when you take it, you get a real certificate, and your record stays for the next 100 or 200 years at Texas A&M. Meanwhile, we're expanding our summer program for high school students, which allowed students from different majors to come and participate, both as counselors and curriculum designers. Now our students have built out, a lot of our students were part of the micro-credentialing program. On the right, you can see the learning management system, what it looks like. And if any of you are excited or interested in taking that, I highly encourage you to take those courses and give us some feedback. And on the top right, you can see Becky and Kathleen's design for cybersecurity and coding for middle and high school students. A lot of the coursework is once again designed by students, and all these programs are just coming together very quickly. Next slide, please. So all this work with school, it was, a lot of outreach, a lot of ticketing, and we've been there. Now the question was, can we develop technologies? So we started building apps for teachers. This app's available in 14 countries. It's used by teachers to record their daily learnings, and it is part of teacher training. Our cloud integration strategy went up to Google Cloud, and we were the first to publish AI models running on a Raspberry Pi. That's a photograph from the first day that we ran it. There's also a timestamp on the clock behind. And back then, when you ran ImageNet on a Raspberry Pi, there was a serious danger of the Pi board actually melting out. Since then, we've progressed. The Texas A&M dashboard on Open on Demand has been adopted by other institutions. You can see that our researchers can see the allocations, there's a ticketing function, there's containerized support, and all this is built in to Open on Demand. Automation and integration, that has been a recent focus. So now all our RT functions are integrated in Slack, Jira, and Google Drive. So the moment a ticket comes in, the Slack bot creates a really cool function in Slack. All you do is you click, it creates a record in Google Drive and transports it back to RT. And the Jira functions shows it as being completed as well. So very powerful stuff. It's very new. We'll talk about it at PERC. And all of this amazing work is being done by students. And the key thing over here is that the students come from different backgrounds. They're not all CS and engineering majors. We have physicists, and we're trying to get a history major on our team too. So yay, exciting stuff. All right, next slide, please, Tim. All right, so now you've built all this stuff. What do you do with it? You still have researchers, and you want to make sure that researchers are using your materials. So our students created a YouTube channel. It's the High Performance Research Computing channel. We have close to 1,000 subscribers. We're not there yet, but we get a lot of views. Our student peer mentoring teams now make sure that student onboarding doesn't require any staff. It's students onboard students. I think that would be great for next week. Our students manage our wiki and knowledge base, and they've been keeping the Breaks and Sweeter communities going. This is through engagements, the training, and our student program was featured on the local news, which was fantastic. And if any of you were there at the Breaks talk at Supercomputing, you heard Kathleen and Becky give a very powerful view of how 20-year-olds view the future of HPC and large-scale computing. And if you get a chance to talk to them in the future, they'll probably be at the next PERC and SC conferences. Next slide, please. All right. So you've done all of this. What is the next step? So we've now focused on running CI applications on ACES and Faster, which are composable machines where jobs scale up to 20 GPUs at the same time. And we are benchmarking against Frontera and emerging CI technologies. Our students are developing GUIs. And at this point, our IoT and FPGA support is largely run by a student, incredible graduate student. Abhinand's been working on that. We've been focusing on containerized applications. That is largely Kenton's domain. He'll do an internship at Los Alamos over summer and working with Charlie Cloud. Code development, optimization, and analysis. These are aspects we've just continue to work on. And finally, we've been really focused on engaging with other disciplines. It's a process. It takes time, and the community also grows more trusting of you, and it accepts you. And so we're gradually going in that direction. In terms of dissemination, we published a PERC paper. Our students published a PERC paper on the OOD interface as well. And we were picked up by the SEC news outlet for our work on benchmarking via our student program. Next slide, please. And finally, I would like to thank all these fantastic funding agencies which made this possible. Some of our student programs are funded through Texas A&M, but a large part of them are funded via grants, and students at this point help us write these grants, put them together, and we are very grateful for the support from them. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, before we hit up the survey, I'd like to pause to ask a few questions. Drew, what a great presentation. And I'll start with a couple questions that I have. So thinking about your micro-credential program, what does that can you give me the sales pitch on what does that enable the students and how do they use it? Because I find that a very fascinating thing that we've been kicking around. I just don't like, how are you playing that out? What did the students see in that? And what does the university see in that?
Oh my God, that's a different presentation. So, all right. So, pitches. So there are 21 CI credentials. These are in bioinformatics, AI, ML, coding, accelerator technologies, and R. So we cover the data science, AI, ML, and we also have some cybersecurity credentials. The idea is, since these are micro credentials, they are 0.3 certified units or PDUs. You can convert between them. And these credentials are at this point open to everyone in Texas, but now that FASTER and ACES are available via Access, if people can get an AccessNet ID, we can open it up to everyone around the country. The major cost, we've tried to keep this really low cost, right? Like if you go on Coursera and try to take Python from University of Michigan, you'll probably be paying in the 4 figures. We're trying to keep this in the 2 figures. So, and the majority of the cost goes in maintaining the transcript because it's a community service. So far, we've had, I want to say about 100 odd students cycle through a pilot phase and complete these credentials. Our biggest challenge has, go ahead.
Are they targeted undergraduate or graduate? Because the way you describe that seems like it's almost like at graduate level coursework.
So, it's interesting because our Python course begins at, so the way we did it was for Python, we started at the very basics, but we've structured it so there's several micro credentials. So it's pretty much you enter where you feel comfortable. But the genomics courses are more for a graduate or professional audience. It's more like you just want to learn the technology. And so let us say you want to learn this toolkit, this is how you do it. And that's how so it's a very skills-based credential, which makes it applicable in the professional space as well as in the community college space. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with our, go ahead.
Did your university fund that, or did you do that through an NSF grant? How did you get that off the ground?
So the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board had this program that they wanted to create micro credentials, and we applied. And we were lucky to be selected. And so that just paved the way. It was very fast. We started in February of last year, and we had to get it done by September 30th, or we lost all the money. So there was a strong motivating factor to get it done. And so it's live now.
Do you have the other question I have, and then I'll let other people ask questions. Do you have a branding webpage that we could point to share your stories? Can you provide that? And we will probably put that in our notes if you're okay with that.
For the micro credentials or for the student
just programs? Your program in general. Yeah, just your program in general.
That's a good thing. We need to do that. We can probably create it in a couple of days.
Oh, if you don't have one, it's not a big deal.
No, it's fine. Our students love doing things like this. They run the website.
Okay. So if you don't have a website, I don't know if you hit on this very, very much though, then how do you do recruitment without a web page? What's your recruitment strategy look like?
Word of mouth.
Wow. Okay.
We get 100+ applications for every opening. So our students pretty much go and tell people what it's like. Apparently there's a hidden Reddit thread about us. I haven't found
Hopefully
it.
It's good.
I hope so. The students come back, so I'm hoping it's good. And then we've just been very fortunate, but it was really hard. When we started in 2017, it was incredibly hard. We were printing out flyers and putting it around campus. We were posting ads online. And now we just, today it's easier. Once the program grows and people know each other, everyone just gets to be in the know, and that's how we're growing. But we are not having as much success on the liberal arts side as I would like to see. The majority of applications are still coming from STEM majors, which is great, but I think our name scares away some students, so it's intimidating. So one of the things we're trying to do is reach out to some of the counselors in the history and maybe in the teaching majors and work with them and make sure that branding and advertising strategy is appropriate. And we also want to make sure that if a student from those majors joins our team, they feel comfortable and they feel welcome. So that's one of the things we are working on. That's a work in progress.
Okay, I'm going to pause to see if there's any other questions that we can discuss.
So I was going to follow up. I was going to ask that question about recruiting. So how many active students do you have? Let's just say now, how many students do you have working for you?
I want to say 14 students.
Oh, okay. And do you usually have them for long periods of time, multiple semesters, multiple years? How does that work? Do students?
So a lot of our students stayed on and became full-time staff. And actually most of HPRC is from former student workers. So I'm one of the exceptions to the rule. But even out of our previous students, several became staff and then they got poached away in recent years. But typically our students would stay, they would join in fall, they would stay till spring, then they go out on their internship and then come back in fall again. Some take up a temporary residency in a company. So we even lost students for the better part of a year where they take a hiatus from the academic program, they go and do a co-op in industry and then come back and work with us. So one of our students did that. He's doing incredibly well. But in terms of retention, I want to say our biggest challenge are the students we hire in summer, because they are joining us because they need a summer job or their academic appointment has ended, and then come fall, they go back to the academic environment. So with our typical fall spring batch, I would say our retention's maybe 90 to 100%. But with our summer batch, I would say our retention maybe at 50%, which we're very comfortable with. That suits our business model.
There was a question in the chat. Do your student applicants come from a variety of disciplines, or where do they come from today?
So we get a lot of we do not get a lot of applicants from computer science. I'll clear that off. You'd think that we do, but no, we don't. So we get a lot of applicants from MIS positions. We get a lot from electrical engineering, chemical engineering, chemistry, biology, but computer science, we don't do as well as you would imagine that we would, because our focus is more on the CI technology side rather than on the more computer science aspect. So we are not quite that competitive. They're like, and there are good positions out there. So I don't blame them for looking there. But as I was saying, our biggest challenge is the non-STEM majors. We want to make sure that we are targeting them and we can include them in our student worker population as well.
And I know I don't know if anyone has additional questions. I have one more question that I'd like to ask, and then we'll turn the mic around again. So you mentioned a student mentoring program. How does that work? Is it the student is mentored by a full-time staff? Is that I don't know if you want to go into too much detail, because I think next time that's one of the topics we really want to dig into. But I wanted to at least start to socialize. What does your mentoring program look like?
Oh, that's a good question. So we built a lot of documentation over the years. We've been very good about that. And so a lot of the student tasks are delineated and documented very well with expectations. And we also we provided a lot of guardrails and scaffolding by Jira and Slack. So student expectations, especially from staff, they're well done. Our mentoring approach is, yes, students can solve pretty much every problem you throw at them. What happens when things go wrong? Who's good, and so that has been our approach. So a lot of the mentoring with students today, since they've grown in numbers, is peer mentoring, where the senior students pretty much onboard and bring up the younger students. Marinas could not join us today, but Marinas is in charge of the help desk students, and then I have a few students, and it's distributed across HPRC. where then we have a staff person assigned to every student. So Marinos is the overall student program manager, and then everyone has students working on research projects with them, which are more specific. So when they're publishing papers, the students are included on the papers. We have an unofficial policy to promote student authorship. So when we publish papers, you have to really ask yourself the question, did the student contribute enough to be the lead author? And the student was not contributing sufficiently to be the lead author. Why not? So we flipped the switch where instead of students being referenced in the acknowledgement section, the question is, why aren't you the lead author? Which really promotes people pushing students, and it's good for the field because students are more engaged with the community. Another aspect of mentorship has been recognition. University-wide recognition has been difficult for us, as in our students have yet to win awards at the university level, but at least nationally, we send them to conferences, we pay for their travel, and we encourage internships, mentorships. When a student wants to go on an internship, the only question we ask is, do you need a letter of recommendation? When they go for job applications, when they're applying for jobs, they had an informal group running within our help desk where they were trading questions and training each other. So all of that at this point is just peer mentored. But great question. Like that's just such a huge part of the culture. Oh, and we pay for pizza. That's the important part.
So as we think about next time we meet, I'll probably hit you up because I think there's some aspects of the mentoring that every program across the nation could use that we could collaborate on. We do have a question in the chat. It said, at a particular practical level, how did you handle scheduling of students for ticket help desk support? That's a really great question because scheduling is a nightmare, at least for us.
Yes. So when we just had Derek and Crystal, it was 20 hours of work, and both Derek and Crystal wanted 20 hours of work. So we had that expectation from our students. But then once we went past 5 students, we no longer needed students to sign up for 20 hours of work. And so our minimum expectation is 10 hours of work. But if it's a super experienced student, like last semester we had Chris, and Chris was pretty much an AWS employee and he liked us, so he hung around. So Chris could work as many or as few hours, and he could just build out systems at scale for us. Today, a lot of our student scheduling is automated. So we take a look at the schedules at the start of the semester, just make sure we have coverage between 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and that our students are scheduled to teach the courses. But outside of that, it's pretty much self-run. One thing we have emphasized is if they're sick, we would love for them to stay at home, which they don't do. I'm going to take that as they like being at the help desk. And we have the opposite thing where we don't know who's working because they're hanging out at the help desk and doing the homework. So it's performing a library function. And if I walk across, there's scooters and bikes in a hallway because the kids are just hanging out. So
nice.
We have the opposite problem. Yeah.
So are those tickets are more generic, or they're like the advanced science? Because as I'm thinking about our own help desk, I'm fascinated by this dynamic to see like what kind of training have you put in place, especially if you're early career, undergraduates, they're like, freshman, sophomore. I don't know how much they know about scientific applications and how much impact they can have. So what do you have those early college career students do?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, Betsy. So we have 3 levels of ticketing. The first level is, how do I reset my password? I need an account help. The second level is more general about how do I find software? How do I request software help? Can you help me install software? And the third is supporting science workflows, which is probably the most complicated and the hardest thing to achieve. And where we've been very fortunate is that our graduate students come from industry with 5 to 6 years of industry experience, and we're probably developing these technologies in industry before we even started working on this ourselves. So excuse me, someone named Davis Ron is very desperate to get in touch with me. For from the industry side, one of the things we focused on since we were exploring composability and IoT and Kubernetes, well, we hired students with a strong background from Samsung, from eBay. So these people already had 5 or 6 years of experience working with this. So when we started working with FPGAs, we had experienced people who probably knew more about FPGAs than a lot of folks within the community. So the people on the FPGAs can take on a science workflow with ease, whereas someone who's new is still getting their feet wet. So if they can respond to your ticket and point someone to the correct place on a website which has grown and needs to be redesigned, then that's a big win.
Do we have
And then-
additional oh, wait, I'll pause to see if we have additional questions. It seems like I've been dominating the questions.
So I just do have one question, if I can, quick about you. You mentioned that, getting the ability to hire grad students was a battle through, your administration, et cetera. And so, how did that go? How did you convince them? And do you provide the grad students with tuition waivers?
Yes.
How do you
Yeah. Oh, great question. Slightly stressful, brings back memories. So the good news is today those problems no longer exist. And if we were to redo this today, the value proposition for cyber infrastructure technology exists, and nobody will ask the questions that were being asked back then. So we were viewed as a facility. It wasn't clear to departments if graduate students would be engaged in research, if these positions were worth their time. Departments had TA positions and research opportunities, so they just wanted to ensure that their students were making the best use of their time. But since we've been very active in publishing papers, in collaborating with faculty, with writing grants, the departments were supportive of us. We got a lot of support from Dilma De Silva, who's now at NSF. She was the chair of computer science back then. And so it was our faculty champions who really helped this happen. When we started, our graduate students were making an hourly wage, and all we could get them was a resident tuition waiver. Today, our graduate students are pretty much the same as a graduate student in a department where we cover the tuition, we pay them a competitive monthly stipend, and keep them going. So, but Anita, it would not be fair on my part to say that things are the same today within the environment as it was 4 years ago. And I think the community as a whole has advanced, and we've benefited from that.
Okay, any additional questions?
So it looks like there were a couple people. David, Karsten, do you want to unmute and ask your questions?
So I had the question about the technical aspects of scheduling. So thanks for the answer. So that was really helpful. And related to that was exactly what was brought up with the different tiers. What do you get them started with to make sure, you have insurance of quality of the answers that, researchers don't get turned off by, getting the runaround.
Would you find this a future interesting topic for us to dig deeper into? Because it's easy for Dhruv to say, like, we've set up these tiers, but I think in practice, it takes some more oil, right, to get that working. Like, I think that's a really good future topic, is how do you set up tiered level support, especially if you're using a majority undergraduates, and which I don't know that, Dhruv, you typically are. I think that you have kind of a mix of students where, like, our program is almost all undergraduates. We do have a few graduate level.
Yeah, that's it. So one thing that helped us a lot were two things helped us. Summer internships where the students go, they work in industry, and especially if they're in some kind of CI job, they come back with skills and enthusiasm and passion. And the other thing, which was an even bigger help, was the SC student cluster competitions. So we strongly encourage that because that trains students up so quickly, and really opens their eyes to what everyone else is doing. I think SDSC fielded a fantastic, okay, everyone fielded a fantastic team, but the team from UCSD was just incredible last year. So it was very good for people to go and see what their peers were doing and where they
Huh.
could be
I
and come
think our
back and
IU
be like,
Purdue team did pretty good.
New Texas A&M did very well, but there was just some comments about the team from UCSD about they may have been just a little bit ahead of
Ah,
everyone else. So yeah, it's a good wake up call, right? People are like, oh, okay, that's what my peers are doing. I need to go and work with them in the future. So I should
yeah.
shape up too. So it's good. It's
Uh,
all good.
So before we have people starting to drop off, because I've noticed we have some people that a couple at least that have gone, we have a survey that Anita wanted to put out. It's about wage, what you're paying your folks. If you don't mind, I just dropped in a link. It's just a very, very quick Qualtrics survey. Shouldn't take more than a few minutes to answer. We're just trying to get a range of, and of course, depending on your university, you might have to pay differently. Claire, I'm sort of looking at you. I'm guessing your wage salaries would be totally different than the wage salaries in Lafayette, Indiana, but maybe, maybe not.
So I can just,
Go ahead.
sorry for the interruption. I would just give a little bit of background. We struggle here, at Utah, we're trying to push through a wage increase, an increase of this minimum entry level for our students. Especially in these days, we started with $12 an hour, and it was $12 an hour for a long time. We did get them a raise to a minimum of 15, but still with, inflation and everything else, being able to keep students, keep them happy, make sure they're earning enough to meet their needs. So we're just really looking for some ammunition, if you will, getting the information about what other institutions are doing. And hopefully that'll help convince our higher ups that we do need to address this.
It's an interesting dilemma because at Purdue, Research Computing and Laura's group, who's also on the call today from Innovation Center, we were actually paying a lot higher than the central IT were. So anytime we'd have a position open, people were like, hey, we want to come work for you because you're paying like literally $5 or $6 more an hour than the central IT students were. And in some cases, we were paying more than staff people. So, and of course you can just go down the street to Culver's. They were advertising at like $20 an hour. So like, it's kind of a range of like what motivates students to come. And sometimes it's got to be the pay, but I think it's also like the program itself, right? I guess, but it's got to start with the pay because that's how they're motivated. They have to live.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if everyone could take a few minutes to do that. The next time I want to talk a little bit about what we want to accomplish next time. So next time we're going to take a much deeper dive into the workforce part of this and onboarding in particular. So I think Anita and I would like to tackle a little bit about like, what does onboarding look like for each of the institutions? And we might reach out directly to specific people asking, do you have artifacts you can contribute back to the community? Because as we're thinking about this, Drew, you mentioned you have scaffolding. I think you mentioned it, something like this, or a handbook. Like, could we contribute something like that back to this community as well as we have a student handbook, we have a student mentor handbook, and I know Anita, you're working on your own artifacts. What we'd like to see is that we come together as a community and be able to give back some of those artifacts so people that are just getting programs off the ground know at least where to start. This was one of the big things that stuck out really in the survey immediately, is how do you get started? And I wonder if we don't approach it from the, basically, how do you get started? And having some of that foundational work is going to be imperative for new programs. And I don't know if anyone has additional ideas of topics. And of course, next time we'll also listen, Elper, who I think is on the call. I thought I saw him pop in. Elper
I'm
will
here.
be, hey, how you doing?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think next time he'll be doing a presentation, or someone from Northwestern.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay. So, but we want to attack it kind of in two veins, hear from Northwestern, but then we also want to start getting some real work that we can give back to the community. So if you're interested, again, I would encourage you to reach out to myself or Anita and figure out if there's topics in specifically in this vein that you'd like to hear us discuss. I don't know if you want to take a few minutes now to hear anyone's opinion on what would be useful in our next session.
So as we're waiting, you can also just add it to the running notes, the link that we've been putting in chat. You can add any suggestions for future topics. And I also wanted, just as a reminder, we've been alternating, at least for the last few months and for the relatively near future, we're alternating and doing these every other month, with the alternating months being a staff workforce development topic, with Claire and Tim taking the lead on those. So the March call will be on staff, and then the April call will be the Northwestern and onboarding for student programs.
Yeah. And Claire, did you have anything, you or Tim have a shout out for next month's topic?
No, just look for the announcement coming out. Welcome. And again, like as with the student workforce development group, if you have particular topics that you're interested in, by all means reach out and let us know what those are. You can find us on the CARC website or on Slack.
And we did see like some of those topics that cross over, like mentoring as specific, was topics we might collaborate, both staff and students together, right, Claire?
Absolutely. And there's also the ability, there's some working groups that are starting, and one of them is on mentoring. So that's one of those crossover topics, like you said, Betsy. So if people are interested in that, they should sign up for those working groups. And it will be up to the working group to decide what the product is. So how much effort you want to put in, how long you want the working group to go.
And where can they find that working group if they were, is that on the CARC website itself? Where can they find that information?
Good question. We put out some information on that. I'll drop a link in the chat.
Perfect. Because I do think there's a fairly big interest in mentoring, at least that as a topic. And I firmly believe it crosses over from student to staff very quickly. All right, very good. Any other questions or last minute thoughts? We will probably end a little bit early today.
Betsy, when you're thinking of these things, one of the challenges we face with our growing student group is, how do you ensure quality? Because so I still try to read every ticket which comes in and goes out, but yeah.
How is that possible?
I don't know. It's insane, but we get over 1,000 tickets a month, so it's a lot. And that's why you always see me staring at my phone. But and then we have other people doing that. It was easier in the past when we had a smaller student group to walk in and coach them and work with them. But as they've grown and as peer mentoring has grown, and as I've grown older, and I've wondered if maybe I've forgotten how to communicate with the current diaspora of students. I'd be curious to hear how people would be ensuring quality in ticketing responses, especially for, not templated ticket responses. Like templated ticket responses are easy. Those are not the ones I worry about. It's when you get the weird tickets and you get an enthusiastic student who jumps in and thinks they've solved the problem and they close a ticket. Whereas, so, what are the structures people have put in place to ensure that this does not happen?
Yeah, that's an interesting, we don't even quality control, I think, our full-time staff tickets. I shouldn't have said that out loud. Oh crap, it's being recorded.
You're recorded, Betsy.
I'm sure it's quality controlled, right, Laura? And I think that Laura and Amanda, I think, are on the call. So, maybe they dropped off. Whew.
Yeah, I think on that level, one of the things that we are struggling, there's a tipping point, like we are managing 5, 6, 7 students at this point, but beyond some point, you can't have just one supervisor. Like that's really hard to manage. Like even though you distribute as like mentors in your group, like other staff could be mentors, there's still one supervisor, right? Like who the students are reported to. At some point, it becomes a bit unmanageable, and like just giving that person the responsibility to do that, all that checking up on the students, quality control, becomes a bit problematic, because all they need to do, or they would do, is student managing at some point. But you expect them to do like all the other computational or data related activities in the group. So we are basically at a point that we are dealing with that. So somebody is managing our student team, but like half an hour or 15 minutes meetings every week. On top of that, like checking the quality on the tickets, training, and so on. It turns out to be like almost a full-time job at some point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So Alpha, I had our mentors do an exercise because they were not doing any of the management burden, right? The HR functions. They didn't have to do that. They just got the students and they asked the students to work with them. So every mentor, every semester has to write a 2-page description of accomplishments by the student.
Okay.
And it's a formatted exercise which keeps the mentors in space, so they don't think it's a free resource they're getting that they can just blow away. And we took away students from some mentors because they were unable to justify how the student was progressing under them. And then those who did a fantastic job were rewarded with more student work technicians.
I see. Yeah, it
And then-
definitely helps to distribute some of the burden.
And then we had run into this other interesting issue, which is for more like the staff development side, where we had students who had now become staff, but they were very young, whereas our students were coming in post-industry for an advanced degree. So the student actually had more management experience than the staff who was mentoring them, which led to an interesting mix. And when the student was mentoring the staff member, maybe it's all okay. Maybe it just comes out in the wash 5 years from now. Everyone has a beer, but it's an interesting environment.
That's pretty cool. Okay, any last minute follow-ups before we end for today?
I'll just say thanks to all for your participation. I will post the recording on that running doc, hopefully by sometime tomorrow.
Yeah, and again, we encourage you